Recent updates in these disturbing mysteries have brought investigators one step closer to solving the cases and getting justice for any victims, years or even decades after the mystery began. Number 10. The East Castle Street robbery is one of the largest unsolved heists in British post-war history. What would amount to millions of pounds in today's money was stolen from a post van in a London street side in 1952. Newly uncovered tapes reveal that the heist could have been solved decades ago. The heist took place at around 4:20 a.m. on May 21st, 1952. A post office van was transporting high-value packets from a train station to the Eastern Central District office. The route would normally take them through Oxford Circus, but roadworks meant the three postal workers had to take a nearby side street. According to a witness staying in a hotel overlooking the street, the van was stopped by a car that had backed slowly into the street, blocking the way. A second vehicle then pulled up behind the van and blocked it in. The three workers were pulled from the van and attacked by a gang of several men. The witnesses rushed to the phone to call the police, but by the time he'd returned moments later, the heist was over. The thieves had taken the van with them as they made their escape. The van was later discovered abandoned, with around 287,000 pounds stolen from mailbags. The money would be worth around $7.3 million today. At that point, it was the largest post-war theft in Britain, and the mystery gained national attention. Even the Prime Minister asked for regular updates from the police. The heist was obviously the work of a well-disciplined group. It was expected that the group may have had military or police training, which wouldn't have been too unusual so soon after the war. The police also suspected that postal workers may have had a hand in the crime. The van had an interior emergency alarm that could have been activated before the postal workers were forced out of the vehicle. But when the police inspected the van, they found that the alarm had been disarmed. The driver also hadn't followed procedure with the key, keeping it on the front seat of the van rather than giving it to the security guard. Despite intensive investigations, the case went cold. The police suspected a number of criminals involved in organized crime, but did not have any evidence to bring them in. In the decades since the mystery began, there have been a few updates. One of the main suspects was Terry Hogan, a known criminal. His daughter told the media that he was involved in the crime and practiced the robbery by driving up and down East Castle Street. But it was believed that none of the men allegedly involved ever confessed, which meant the mystery officially remained unsolved. But new research has proved that isn't entirely true. In the 1990s, Alexander James Sullivan sat down for an interview with an academic. It was a time when lots of criminals were starting to tell their stories and earning a lot of money doing so. Sullivan outlined his role in the East Castle Street robbery. He claimed that the ringleader was Billy Hill, a gangster who'd been involved in organized crime since the 1920s, and who was responsible for the 1954 KLM gold bullion robbery. The crime was carefully planned, with special focus on what happened after the men got the money. A lot of time was put into making sure no one got caught. The planning worked out, and nobody involved would ever be found out. Billy Hill had passed away by the time the interview took place, and Sullivan would pass away shortly afterwards. Number 9. In early January 2023, the police were called to the home of Richard and Rita Zeo. Days earlier, someone had taken their lives and fled the scene, leaving behind few clues. Over 2 years later, an attack on a border patrol officer in another state brought new attention to the case and a strange update. Richard and Rita lived in Chester Heights, Pennsylvania. Richard was 72 and Rita was 3 years younger. They owned several rental units in a nearby town. According to one former tenant, Richard was a diligent landlord, renting out properties for less than others in the area and encouraging his tenants to save money so they could buy their own homes. Nobody in the community expected the events of December 31st, 2022. It was around 11:30 p.m. when a neighbor's doorbell camera picked up an unknown vehicle pulling up outside the Zykos' home. Moments later, a voice could be heard shouting, "Mom," followed by someone pleading. There was a little movement, like the front door opening and closing, and upstairs lights turning on, before two people were seen leaving through the front door. They drove off, leaving behind a horrifying scene that wouldn't be discovered until days later. One of the first people the police needed to speak to was the Zykos' daughter. The couple had adopted their daughter Michelle when she was a baby. She was now in her late 20s and lived in Vermont after studying biology and bioinformatics at university. Michelle claimed she hadn't spoken to her parents since January 2022 and hadn't seen them since the COVID-19 lockdowns. But a message from Rita's phone to Michelle suggested they were still in touch shortly before Rita's life was taken. The police found a weapon at Michelle's home. It matched one that could have been used in the crime and had recently been cleaned, but authorities didn't have permission to seize the weapon. Shortly afterward, Michelle was brought in for questioning. She refused to cooperate and was let go. The police asked her to wait in the lobby so they could bring her car to her, but Michelle fled the scene. She left behind her car and $40,000 in cash. The mystery went cold, but Michelle remained a person of interest in the case. In January 2025, the case returned to the headlines when the police made a shocking update. In Vermont, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol agent David Malland stopped a car. According to authorities, a passenger named Teresa Youngblunt opened fire on the agent, and a firefight began. The car's driver, Ophelia Bachholdt, lost her life, as did Agent Malland. Now, the police said that the weapon used in the attack had been purchased by a person of interest in Richard and Rita's case. It was later revealed that this person was Michelle. In February, authorities searched a home where Youngblunt and Bachholdt were living. There, they found Michelle Zeo and two other individuals who were arrested on a variety of charges, including trespassing, obstructing and hindering, and possession of a weapon in a vehicle. The arrest tied Michelle to a strange cult-like group known as the Zetians. In a letter written by Michelle, she claimed that the group had been misrepresented in the media and denied having anything to do with her parents' case. Nobody has been arrested in the Zeo case, but Richard and Rita's friends and family hope that this development means the mystery is one step closer to being solved. Number 8. After more than 40 years, police in Western Australia have finally identified a suspect in the mysterious case of Karen Tate. Karen was just 22 years old when she had her life taken from her on December 29, 1979. The case became one of the most high-profile mysteries in the area. Unfortunately, the attention didn't help detectives crack the case. It wasn't until DNA found at the scene of the crime was identified using genetic genealogy that they were able to identify a suspect. Karen was last seen by friends on the morning of the crime. The night before, she had enjoyed herself at a party, then stayed with friends overnight. The following morning, she was dropped off at her Mount Lawley home at about 11 a.m. Just 7 hours later, forestry workers came across a fire in nearby Carrigullen, not far from a residence where Karen had been house-sitting. Among burning music equipment, the police found Karen's body. She'd already passed away before the fire was started. Descriptions of Karen's remains on top of a funeral pyre led to speculation that she might have been the victim of some occult-related crime. Karen had no ties to the occult, and it seemed an unlikely answer to the mystery. Others thought that Karen may have been picked up by the criminal while hitchhiking. She was known to hitchhike and even carried a bike helmet with her in case she was offered a lift by a motorcyclist. Appeals for information turned up a few clues. The music equipment had been stolen months earlier. Guitars that were also stolen weren't found at the crime scene, and the original owners hoped finding the instruments might help find the person who took Karen's life, but the case went cold. In 2023, the police announced a breakthrough. DNA had been collected from the crime scene, but at the time there was little that could be done with it. Now a profile had been made. Unfortunately, it didn't match any other DNA profiles on record, but it provided a starting point for officers using genetic genealogy. By tracing relatives of the unknown individual, they were able to construct a family tree, and in 2025, that finally led to a name. Terrence John Fisher matched the DNA evidence. He'd passed away in 2000 at the age of 50, making him 29 or 30 at the time of the crime. What motivated Fisher to commit the crime may never be known, but the police are appealing to anyone who knew him during his life to come forward. Number 7. In April of 2023, a group of men committed the biggest gold heist in Canadian history. More than 2 years on, the case is still under investigation, with some of the suspected culprits still at large. In the latest update, the residence of the suspected inside man was searched by police in India, bringing the case one step closer to being solved. The heist took place on April 17, 2023. 2 companies in Switzerland needed to transport large sums of gold and foreign currencies to Canada. Air Canada took on the job, with the crate of goods landing at Toronto Pearson Airport just before 4 p.m. local time. The goods were unloaded and kept in a holding facility until someone came to pick them up. At 6:30 p.m., it seemed like that person arrived. A truck was driven into the cargo area, and the driver produced official-looking documents to pick up the gold and currency. There didn't appear to be any problems with the documents, and workers helped to load over 20,000 Canadian dollars worth of goods into the truck. A few hours later, another truck arrived. This one was from Bricks Canada, the cash handling company. They were also there for the gold and currency that had landed earlier that day. Air Canada workers realized the horrifying mistake they had made, and the search for the money began. A police investigation revealed that the truck had been driven into a rural area north of Milton, where the trail was lost. Fortunately, the case didn't go cold. It didn't take the investigators long to begin to identify suspects. The first identified was Simran Preet Panesar. Panesar was an Air Canadian employee. He'd actually been the contact person for the police and had given them a tour of the facility early in the investigation. Those officers had noticed Panesar looked physically ill as he gave the tour. The documents the driver had used to pick up the gold were an altered copy of a genuine document for a delivery that had occurred the day before the heist. It was printed on a device from inside the Air Canada facility. This meant the police were certain there was an inside man. A search of the facility's computers showed Panesar had been looking up high-value shipments. He'd actually been tracking the shipment from Switzerland. After the heist, this activity stopped. The police were already suspicious of Panesar when, 3 months after the heist, he left the country. He'd flown to India, officially to support his wife in her singing and acting career, but at that point, the other people involved in the crime were still a mystery. The police didn't want to spook them by arresting Panesar and had to let him go. Over the next 2 years, 8 other people were identified as suspects. By the 2-year anniversary of the heist, all but 3 had been arrested by the Canadian police. Another individual was arrested in the U.S. on firearms charges. The man had been a truck driver and was now believed to be transporting weapons from the U.S. to Canada. In April 2025, he signed a plea deal in the case. The other 2 suspects still at large were Panesar and Arsalan Chaudhary, the man believed to have been the ringleader in the crime. He's believed to have fled to Dubai, and his whereabouts are unknown. After an investigation by the Canadian media outlet CBC, Panesar's location has been identified by authorities in Canada, who are now working to help solve the case. Number 6. In June of 1997, the torso of a woman was found in Hempstead Lake State Park. She was given the nickname Peaches after a tattoo on her chest. Her identity remained a mystery for over 25 years. In April 2025, the police announced that the woman, previously known as Peaches, was Tanya Jackson, who was 26 years old when she lost her life. Tanya's torso was found by a man walking his daughter in a wooded area of the state park. The torso was in a green rubber container, which also contained a red towel and a floral pillowcase. A search of the area turned up no other remains, and the police had no idea who the mystery woman was. She had a tattoo of a heart-shaped peach on her chest, which they hoped might lead to an identification. Despite the unique identifying feature, nobody could identify the mysterious woman, and the case went cold. In 2011, there was an unexpected update in the case. Police in a neighboring county were searching a road near the town of Gilgo. They'd already turned up the remains of multiple women when they found the partial remains of an unidentified person. DNA matched the remains to Peach's. The location of the remains meant Tanya's case was now connected to that of the Long Island serial killer, or LISK. But the police couldn't rule out that the location was just a coincidence. They also still had no clues as to who Tanya really was. It would take another 10 years before more progress was made in giving Peaches back her name. In 2025, the authorities announced that genetic genealogy had finally solved the mystery. Work had begun on the case in 2020, and DNA from relatives allowed the police to identify Peaches as Tanya Jackson. It was a few more years before they were ready to go public with the information. Tanya was a former U.S. Army servicewoman who was living in Brooklyn at the time of her disappearance. She may have been working in a doctor's office as a medical assistant. Unfortunately, Tanya was estranged from her family, which meant she wasn't reported as a missing person. After the identification, Tanya was buried at the Alabama State Veterans Memorial Cemetery at Spanish Fort, Alabama, with military honors. Number 5. Sharon Ken was serving a 10-year sentence for taking the life of a man in Mexico when she vanished without a trace. Her crimes and jailbreak became the subject of numerous true crime books, podcasts, and videos. In January 2025, the police finally announced a breakthrough in the case. Ken was just 20 years old when the first crime took place. It was March 19, 1960. Ken was married to a man named James, and the couple had a young daughter. It was an unhappy marriage, though. Ken was having affairs, and James was considering divorce. Ken looked for another way out of the relationship. According to her, she was getting ready in the bathroom while her husband took a nap. She heard her daughter ask him, "How does this thing work, Daddy?" Then the sound of a weapon being fired. She rushed into the room to find James had been struck with a bullet while he slept. Friends could attest to the fact that James would sometimes let his daughter play with his weapon, and the incident was deemed a tragic accident. Ken moved on quickly. She took the money from the life insurance policy to buy a new car, and it was there she met salesman Walter Jones. Walter was married, but that didn't stop him from having an affair with Ken. In May of 1960, Ken told Walter she was pregnant with his child. She wanted Walter to end his marriage, but Walter insisted on putting an end to the affair. The next day, Walter's wife Patricia vanished without a trace. She was reported missing, but Walter soon discovered that Ken had arranged a meeting with Patricia and was the last person to have seen her. Ken claimed to have dropped her off at the Joneses' residence, but later stumbled across her body while with another boyfriend. The police didn't believe it was a coincidence, and she soon became a prime suspect in the crime. They also looked into James's accident and decided to charge her for that too. Ken was found not guilty in Patricia's case. A friend confessed to purchasing a weapon for her that matched the one used in the crime, but no weapon was found. James's case was more complicated. She was initially found guilty and served time in prison, but the conviction was overruled. 2 more trials took place. One was ruled a mistrial. The second resulted in a hung jury. Ken was released on bail while she awaited another retrial, but that 4th trial would never happen. Ken fled the country and crossed the border into Mexico. She'd only been in Mexico for a matter of days before she ended up in trouble again. On September 18, 1964, she met Francisco Paredes Ordonez at a bar. She went back to his hotel room where she attacked him, firing a weapon twice and taking his life. She claimed it was self-defense. The Mexican police believed it was a robbery gone wrong. This time, she was found guilty of the crime and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Ken became somewhat of a celebrity in prison, conducting interviews with the newspapers from Kansas, where she told them the prison guards were scared for her. She was 4 years into her sentence when she suddenly vanished. She was last seen on December 7, 1969. Authorities in Mexico and the U.S. began a manhunt, but there were no clues, and her case soon went cold. Her horrifying crimes attracted attention to the case, but she managed to avoid detection for over 50 years. In December 2023, the police in Missouri received an anonymous tip in the case. The tipster claimed that Ken had been living in Canada under the name Deidre Glavis since at least 1979. Glavis had passed away in January of 2022, but the funeral home had taken her fingerprints. The authorities were able to compare these to those taken after her arrest, and it confirmed Glavis was Ken. Number 4. In October of 1972, a University of Utah student vanished without a trace. His case quickly went cold and was almost forgotten about by everybody but his friends and family. More than 50 years later, a series of coincidences led to the remains of Douglas Brick finally being found. Douglas was in what was supposed to be his final year as a student at Utah. He was born and raised in Pocatello, Idaho, where his mother was still living at the time of his disappearance. Throughout his school years, he'd been a good student and was engaged in extracurricular activities. His first years at the University of Utah had also gone well. But when his mother said goodbye to him as he headed off to his final year of classes, there seemed to be something off about Douglas. Douglas kept his problems to himself, though. Even his roommate at the university didn't realize anything was wrong. But shortly before he vanished, Douglas dropped out of enough classes that he wouldn't be able to graduate at the end of the year. He also wrote a letter to his girlfriend who lived in Houston, and the letter said that she shouldn't expect to hear from him, and he was going somewhere where nobody would find him. Details of the final moments before Douglas disappeared have also vanished in the years since the mystery began. Where and when exactly he was last seen is uncertain, but Douglas's date of disappearance is listed as October 12th. Douglas's roommate was the first person to realize he was missing. He contacted the police and Douglas's family. When they searched his room, they discovered Douglas had purchased a large amount of ammunition, and a box of bullets was missing. The police soon found his car, which was neatly packed up with his belongings, not far from the university. A search of the surrounding area turned up no clues. For almost a year, the search continued, but the police were no closer to finding answers. With no new information to go on, the mystery went cold, and would remain that way for decades. In 2022, Douglas's brother tried to renew interest in his case when it was discovered that the mystery wasn't logged in federal databases. Around the same time, the university police hired a crime data analyst who took notice of the case. Investigator Lieutenant Heather Sturzenegger agreed to reopen the case. Sturzenegger discovered that Douglas's mother had a chance encounter with a psychic years earlier. When she asked about her son, the psychic gave details that she apparently could not have known, and claimed that Douglas had gone off into the mountains near the university, where he contemplated taking his own life. The student became scared and decided to go home, but lost his footing in the dark. Despite the DNA from Douglas's family, there didn't seem to be any new lines of inquiry until October of 2024. Hunters in the mountains near the University of Utah stumbled across skull fragments. The fragments were taken to an out-of-state lab which specialized in extracting DNA from weathered bones, and this was then compared to samples provided by Douglas's family. In May of 2025, the police were able to confirm that the remains belonged to Douglas. How exactly he ended up near the summit of Black Mountain and what happened to him still remains a mystery, though. Number 3. During the Second World War, the German army looted art, gold, and other precious artifacts from occupied nations, Jewish people, and other victims of the regime. Much of this treasure was discovered by Allied forces, but some remains lost to this day. Shortly after the war, rumors of a gold train sprang up. According to the legend, near the end of the war, artifacts were loaded onto an armored train in the town of Wrocław, Poland. The mysterious train was then hidden somewhere in the Owl Mountains and is yet to be found. Historians aren't certain that the gold train actually exists. There's a large list of lost artifacts stolen by the Axis powers during the war. The most famous of these is the Amber Room, a room made up of artwork and precious materials that was once located in Russia's Catherine Palace. The Amber Room was dismantled and taken away, with the artifacts never to be found. It's possible these other missing artworks were once aboard the mysterious gold train, but were removed when the train disappeared somewhere in a network of tunnels under the control of the Axis forces in the war. But many believe that the items could still be aboard this mysterious armored train, sealed away, just waiting to be found. In the decades since the end of the war, treasure hunters have scoured the mountains searching for any trace of the train. In 2015, 2 hunters made headlines when they claimed to have found the train. Ground-penetrating radar had revealed something that looked like the train. A massive search operation got underway, and cavities were found, but there was no train. The artifact spotted on the radar turned out to be an underground ice formation. The search was mostly abandoned, but some treasure hunters remained behind, still certain they might uncover something hidden in the mountains. Recently, there came a new update to this historical mystery. An unidentified man sent a letter to Polish officials in April of 2025. He claimed to have found camouflaged train carriages in a tunnel. The carriages were supposedly hidden behind a sliding steel gate, and the letter contained details that made the claim seem legitimate. They included information like geodetic data, a terrain profile, and a map with track simulation and tunnel course. He also included an account from a witness who lived in the area during the war. Unlike in the 2015 update, the man didn't want any publicity for himself. He asked to remain anonymous and didn't request permission to dig for the treasure. It simply seemed like he wanted authorities to know where the treasure was. This makes the tip seem more legitimate, but so far there hasn't been any proof that this wasn't just a hoax. Exactly where this was located has not been revealed to the public, but officials said that the letter looked factual and specific. Number 2. In May of 2025, the authorities gave a horrifying update in a disturbing case that was believed to have been solved almost 4 decades ago. For 38 years, an innocent man has been behind bars for the brutal crime committed against Diane Sindall in 1987. The real criminal, nicknamed the Wolfman, had likely been at large that entire time. Diane was just 21 years old when she was attacked and lost her life in Merseyside, England. She was engaged to be married and was working 2 jobs to raise money for the wedding. On the night of August 1st, 1987, she worked a shift as a barmaid at the Wellington Public House. She left work at about 11:45 p.m., taking her blue Fiat van that she used in her job as a florist to take her home to her fiancé. Unfortunately, sometime after midnight, the van ran out of gas as Diane drove down the busy Borough Road. Even at that time of night, the road was still relatively busy, and multiple witnesses spotted Diane walking down the road in the direction of an all-night gas station. She was last seen before 12:20 a.m. 12 hours later, a dog walker found Diane's remains in an alleyway opposite the mall. The attack had been so brutal that a pathologist later told the court that it was the worst he'd seen outside a road traffic accident. Part of the attack had involved biting, which earned the criminal the nickname the Wolfman. Even though the crime was committed on a busy street, nobody witnessed it. For the next 8 weeks, there was a sense of terror around the town. Women and girls were told to walk home in groups or wait for male relatives to come and pick them up. Countless men were interviewed. Among them was Peter Sullivan. Peter was 30 years old and unemployed. On the day of the crime, he played a darts match at a local hotel and lost, and he spent the day drinking. Peter was described as having limited intellectual capacity and being very suggestible. He should have been given an appropriate adult during his interviews, but this was denied, and proper legal representation was also denied. During the police interviews, he confessed to the crime, telling them he'd asked Diane for the time before anger took over him. He later recanted the confession and others that he had made. Even though the confessions were recanted, the case still went to trial. There, experts claimed that Peter's teeth perfectly matched the bite marks on Diane's body. The jury was convinced and Peter was found guilty. He'd spend the rest of his life behind bars. Eventually, after more than 30 years, DNA evidence from Diane's body was analyzed using new technology. The DNA didn't belong to anyone in Diane's family or her fiancé, and it also didn't belong to Peter Sullivan. An appeal was made, and Peter's conviction was overturned. He told the media he wasn't angry or bitter about the last 30 years, and wanted to focus on making the most of the remainder of his life, leaving this case now unsolved. Number 1. In November of 1980, 2 women disappeared in the Italian mountains. It was over a year before their bodies were found, but the discovery of the remains didn't solve the mystery or stop speculation about what happened to the former Lady de Rothschild and her secretary. Jeanette Bishop May was in Italy, checking up on a house she was in the process of renovating when she vanished without a trace. Jeanette had once been married to banker Evelyn de Rothschild, a fact that meant her day-to-day life could attract media attention if she wanted it. She had divorced Rothschild years earlier and was now married to businessman Stephen May. Stephen supported Jeanette's interest in antiques and renovations, and the couple bought a house in Sarnano to fix it up. It was a project Jeanette was passionate about. On the 29th of November, 1980, Jeanette took her friend and secretary, Gabriella Guerin, up to the house to check on the work. One of the last people to see the two alive was surveyor Nazareno Venanzi. Jeanette showed him a gate she was thinking of getting and told him they were going sightseeing in the Sibillini Mountains. She invited Nazareno to come with them, but he turned down the offer. He actually warned the women to be careful as a snowstorm was forecast, but they went ahead on their trip anyway. When they didn't make it back to the hotel staff alerted authorities. A search party was soon set out to try to find the two women. It wasn't until 3 weeks later that Jeanette's black Peugeot was found partially buried in a snowdrift. Rescue teams quickly dug out the car, only to discover there was nobody inside. The snowstorm had also removed any trace of where the women went after leaving the vehicle, offering no leads. The case went cold. Italian police hoped that they would be able to find answers when the snow melted in the summer. In the meantime, the media speculated about what might have happened to the women. Many feared she may have been kidnapped for ransom, something that had recently happened to a man suspected of being connected to the Rothschild family. Telegrams connected Jeanette to a jewelry robbery that took place the day after she vanished, but this was later determined to be a hoax. Rumors connected Jeanette to various other crimes. When the snow was cleared, no answers were to be found. It wasn't until January 1982 that hunters located the remains of the two women. They were in a bad state and had been disturbed by animals. It was impossible to determine how they had passed away, but the police initially believed it was hypothermia. But some clues suggested a less than natural explanation for the mystery. Jeanette and Gabriella's watches had been stopped at the exact same time, but days apart. There was also evidence they'd sheltered in a nearby cottage for a while, where there was food and a fire, but they'd left for no clear reason. Rumors continued to spread, even as the authorities ruled that foul play couldn't be determined. But the case went cold and was slowly forgotten about. Over the decades, there have been a few updates with new questions in the case. Now, Italian authorities have reopened the investigation into the case. Foul play is suspected, but the police aren't putting any weight into theories about the mafia or spies. Instead, they believe there is a local connection. Witnesses saw the two women getting into a car with a man and driving away. If the sighting is accurate, this man could hold the answer to this strange mystery. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.